Wheat has been around for tens of thousands of years, first growing wild and then being cultivated by early mankind. Selective breeding over the centuries has resulted in modern-day wheat, and that continues even now. Dr. Brett Carver is a Regents Professor of Wheat Breeding and Genetics at Oklahoma State University.
And the breeding process is a multi-stage process. It's several parts to it. Our growers and the public really get to see the very end point of that process, and that is in the variety trials, usually. We're standing in a part of the process that nobody really gets to see.
And that process goes from the lab to the field, back to the lab, and then back to the field, over and over again for 10 years. Thousands of potential varieties are narrowed down each growing season.
To be exact, we have 61,000 head rows, and 5,000 of those are actually not here. They're out in the panhandle because we want to select those under the conditions that occur out there, which we cannot recreate here in Stillwater. But of those 61,000, I will attempt to narrow that down to about 2,500 to 3,000 to go into what we call a preliminary yield nursery the following year. That's next year. And from those 3,000, we'll narrow that down to about 300 to 500. And then the next year, it'll be narrowed down to half that many, hopefully less than that. And by the time we get to 5 years after this point, we're down to a handful of lines we're looking at as a possible commercial product.
And getting to that handful is simply a matter of walking through each row and picking out the best candidates.
We're not really measuring yield here. You can't measure yield in a 4-foot row. Again, all we're trying to do is find the ones that we want to give a ticket to, and that ticket gives them a pass to be tested next year in conventional plots in certain parts of the state.
As you can see, Dr. Carver has a can of spray paint that he's using to mark the plants he wants collected. These are the candidates that will go on to the next round.
See a nice filled head, good head type, good head size, good stature, the right height, maybe a little short, but that's good. That's good.
This is year 5 of a 10-year process. Dr. Carver calls these wheat plants his 5th graders.
Again, the multi-stage process involves some crossing to begin with, which occurs here in Stillwater. Go through an inbreeding process that takes place in certain places of the state, usually with grazing, to incorporate the grazing grain breeding procedure. And then at that point, after we have done the necessary inbreeding, which is the natural thing that wheat likes to do, we develop the experimental lines. That's the nursery we're standing in right now. And these experimental lines eventually become the varieties that we talk about that had names associated with them.
Some of those names you would recognize: Gallagher, Double Stop, CL+, Smith's Gold, and Spirit Rider. All of them went through this process. Dr. Brett Carver with Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. Reporting for the Oklahoma Wheat Commission and Oklahoma Genetics Incorporated, I'm Don Atkinson.